Hi, I'm Steve. Welcome to my studio. A lot of players get their gnarly tones by taking a clean sound and slapping a dry pedal on top of it. And that works great, but for this tone, I wanted to try something different. I wanted the aggression, the hair, the attitude to come from the amp itself, not from a pedal. Not from stacking gain, but from hitting the amp in certain ways. See, back in the day, guitarists didn't have presets, effects chains, or multiple amp channels. Most players had one or two guitars and an amp. Want a thicker sound? You grabbed a Gibson. Want less output and more bite? You grabbed a Fender. They worked inside those limitations, and a lot of really great guitar tones came out of that. And that's what I want with this tone. Something that gives me a lot of mileage. Something that lets the sound of the guitar come through, and something I can control with just my volume knob and pickup selection. And the cool thing is, this tone is built on the same amp as the clean tone from the last video. Same speaker cab IRs, same foundation. What's changed isn't the environment, it's how the amp is being pushed and shaped. Now this tone, I call it gnarly, isn't the result of any one big move. It's the accumulation of a lot of smaller choices across the amp. Almost every tab matters here. Nearly every section contributes to how this amp feels and responds. So I'm going to walk through this top to bottom exactly as it's laid out in the Axe-Fx. Not to create parameter soup, but to show how all of these pieces interact to create one cohesive snarling tone. Now, before we get into the details, let's hear it again. Also, using the same impulse responses helps me to keep things consistent across tones, like one big cohesive rig. Okay, so let's take a look at this tone. Now, before we do the amp block, I do have a compressor on here. Now, this isn't about squashing dynamics. It's about shaping how the amp gets hit. I'm using the citrus juicer compressor here. Same settings as my clean tone. It's not hitting the amp real hard, just enough to kind of smooth out the front edge and keep the amp feeling consistent when I dig in. I'm going to turn off the delay here and show you what I mean. Okay, first, this is without the compressor. And this will be with the compressor. So you see, the dynamics are still there. This just helps the amp to react more predictably once I start really hitting it. Now let's head into the amp block. I'm using the Band Commander, Fractal's take on a Fender Bandmaster. This amp, when it's pushed the right way, has a really interesting raw breakup character that works equally well for more gnarly tones as well as mid-gain classic crunch sounds. And because it's the same amp I used on the clean tone, I could easily roll back on the guitar's volume and it cleans up nicely. In fact, sometimes I prefer this over a dedicated clean tone. So no cap changes, no IR swaps. The difference is entirely in how the amp is being driven and shaped. Now the tone tab here is where the basic attitude of the amp starts to show up. I've brought the gain up here considerably, up to 8, not to try and turn this into a high gain amp, but so that I can get the amp living firmly in that edge of breakup territory where it can really snarl when I dig in. Now the low end is cranked here, it's all the way on 10, but it's controlled, not flubby. The highs are present, but not sharp. I've got them set at 4.25 and the bright switch is on. See, this tone needs to bark, but not fizz. Now let's hear it with everything else bypassed so we can focus on just what the amp itself is doing. So you can hear that the tone and the grit are already there without anything else being added on top. Now moving into the ideal tab, I'm not trying to radically revoice the amp here, but I am doing quite a bit. For starters, I've turned on the low cut here. With this, I'm able to crank the bass, but it's sculpted, so it's not so woofy. I wanted a little more presence, and I also added some depth to compensate for what is lost with the low cut engaged. I've also got both the fat and the bright switches on. Here it is with and without the fat switch. And then here's with it. Now, I'll be honest, I really do like it both ways, so I may assign a foot switch to turn that on and off so I can have the best of both worlds. I've also turned up the high treble and the bright cap value just a bit. The master volume here is dimed, and this is how this model is designed to behave. Now, down here in the preamp tab, I've also changed a few things. First off here with the preamp tube type, I've kept the 12AX7A JJ tubes here from the clean tone. The default tube type for this amp is the 12AX7, the Sylvanias. And I'll switch back to those, and then I'll show you why I decided on the JJs. Now, to me, the Sylvanias feel a little softer and a little more mushy. It's subtle, but for this tone, I want a faster, more immediate attack. Something that reacts aggressively when I dig in. So the JJs made more sense here. Now, I've also brought the low cut frequency up to keep the low end from collapsing once the amp starts to snarl. This is one of those small moves that makes a big difference in how tight the amp feels. Now down here on the bottom row, I've increased the tube hardness and the preamp bias. Now about the tube hardness, the Fractal Wiki says, higher values will cause the overtone series to have a less steep decay and will increase perceived sparkle. Use this control with preamp bias to control how chimey and round the tone is. Now, I couldn't have said it any better, so I won't. Now down here in the power amp tab, I haven't changed a thing. The negative feedback is up a little from the amp's default setting, but it's right where it was on the clean sound. This helps to tighten the response and keeps the amp from getting loose or spongy once things start to get driven. The Power Tubes plus CF, which stands for Cathode Follower, tab here also plays a big role in how this tone feels. I've set the grid bias to right at 70%, which is typically where I start when I'm biasing real amps. Here it gives the amp a really balanced response. It's aggressive without getting harsh. I can really feel that tube vibe when I dig into it, even though there's no real tubes. Now, if you saw my clean tone video, you'll recall that I brought up both controls here in the cathode followers section. As I showed in the lead video, this isn't about adding distortion. It's about pushing the tube behavior in a way that it adds warmth and density. The harmonics knob flattens out the mids a little bit, which I don't really want, so I brought that down. Once again, I didn't make any changes here in the power supply tab. The sag here feels right as it is. It's responsive, but it's not mushy. Down here in the speaker tab, there are no changes from the clean tone. It's worth noting, though, that I'm using the impedance curve of the 212 double verb. This matters a lot with old Fender style amps. The Bandmaster uses a 4 ohm output transformer, and mismatching that can dramatically affect headroom, breakup, and feel. Now, I've experienced this firsthand with my real 1970 Bandmaster. The wrong impedance causes the amp to lose headroom and turn flubby and harsh. Here, the 212 double verb, which matches a similar 4 ohm Fender design, is exactly what this amp wants to see. Now, I've also got the speaker drive here set to 1, just enough to add realism without taking over the tone. Now down here in the input EQ tab, just like with both the crunch and the lead tones, I'm boosting 800 hertz here just a little bit. I find that this gives me a little more push and rounds things off really nice. I'll show you what I mean. First, I'll set this to 0, and then I'll go back in there, but I won't enter that yet. I'll enter that in the middle so you can hear the difference. I'm not doing anything in the output EQ tab. Likewise, in the dynamics tab, I haven't changed a thing. The amp really reacts well to touch, so I didn't have to change anything. Now that the amp itself is nice and gnarly, we can talk about drive pedals. This is where a lot of people start, but here, the pedals are pushing an already driven amp, not creating the distortion. Now, I haven't really settled on one particular drive pedal here, so this is kind of an area where Fractal's channels really shine. Now, on the drive block, we've got 4 channels, so I have 4 different drive pedals loaded. Channel A is Super Overdrive, which is Fractal's take on the Boss ST1 Super Overdrive. Channel B, Tube Screamer. Channel C is Zen Drive. And channel D, the OCD. So I'll start with the Super Overdrive, and I'll just kind of scroll through them so you can hear the differences. You can see how each different pedal emphasizes a different flavor. Mid-range, compression, attack. But notice that the core tonal character stays about the same. That's because the amp already has teeth. The tone's already been defined. These pedals don't replace the amp's character. They just push it forward and add drive and focus for lead playing. The sustain is there, the aggression is there, but it still feels connected to the rhythm tone. Now, just like with the other sounds in this series, the effects are here to support the tone, not to define it. And for that, I like some reverb and some delay for space and context. Now, in a band setting, I would probably pull these back a good bit, but for playing here at home, I like how this sounds. Now, once again, I'm using the multi-delay, and it's set to the Aurora preset. And you see here, I've got quarter note and dotted eighth note, and it's the same on delays 3 and 4. And then for reverb, I'm just using the Recording Studio C factory preset. Now, I'll turn the delay off so you can hear just the reverb, and then I'll switch on the delay as well so you can hear what I'm working with. So there you go. This gives us a pretty sweet gnarly tone that we can get a lot of mileage out of. It doesn't rely on pedals to exist, and it's built on the same speaker foundation as the clean, crunch, and lead tones. It's aggressive, it's driven, it's responsive, and it's consistent. Now, as with all the other tones from this video series, this preset will be available on my website at theguitarnerd.com. Now there you can also find my full Contonium preset, which consists of this tone as well as all the others from this video series. And it's all lumped into one preset, and they're all blended to sound really good and work well together. So I hope you'll check it out. As always, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.